Somehow my slide ended up at the end instead of the beginning. Okay. We have been talking over the last couple of weeks about the subject of pre-deciding, deciding the things that we can ahead of time to make life easier for ourselves spiritually. And we talked about how that is to help us be ready for the challenges that are coming so that we're not caught in the moment and caught unawares, unexpected, because that's when we tend to make our worst decisions, is when it comes at us out of the blue. And last week we talked about developing a consistency in our life, in our walk with Christ, the realization that we're going to have times where we do make mistakes. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. Um, and the reason it's important for us to understand that, as we talked about last week, we have this tendency, we start something with the idea of consistency, but we relate it to perfection. And when we lose the perfection, for whatever reason, we lose the consistency. We just sort of quit and let it go by. So that's where we've been over the last couple of weeks. This morning, we start off by asking the question, is life going the way that you wanted, or the way that you thought it would? Do you feel disappointed sometimes? I do sometimes. You thought there was going to be more by now? Thought that life was going to be different somehow, that it was going to be better? I don't know how many generations before me the thing existed. I think kids still do it today. I don't even know how we fold them. Some little thing, you put it on your fingers with paper, and you had all these different options written in there. And you'd pick a number and you'd do that, and you'd open it up and tell you what your future was going to be. You're going to have a house, a mansion, or whatever. You were going to be rich or poor, or whatever. You were going to have 6 kids or 4 kids, or we played the game. What was life going to be? We had those dreams. We had those pictures for ourselves of what it was supposed to be. And the reality is, so many times we start getting a little older, and it's not what I pictured it to be. And even in the times when maybe I get what I wanted or what I thought I wanted, the results still just weren't as satisfying as I expected them to be. And so we get left wondering, is this all there is? Or is there something more? Well, here's the spoiler alert. There is more. The more is found in God. And we only get it by getting closer to God. And for whatever reason, that's one of the things that it seems like we struggle the most with, is getting closer to God. A part of that is because we spend so much time trying to think up and dream up of these things that we want in our lives, and then we begin chasing those things to the best of our knowledge, the best of how we think we can arrive at those things, instead of saying, God, what great things have you got for my life? Let me pursue you and see what you bestow upon me. So again, we've been looking at the power of pre-deciding. We talked about it makes us ready. We talked about it makes us consistent. Today, we want to talk about using pre-decision to be devoted to Christ. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 33, Jesus gives us a very simple statement. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And what does he say is going to happen? And all these things will be given to you as well. A simple statement that promises a lot, but it all hinges upon one condition, doesn't it? Seek first the kingdom of God, his righteousness. Jesus could have just said, but seek his kingdom, seek his righteousness, and all this will be added to you. But it's more important than that. We understand we need to search for it, we need to look for it, but we miss out on that first part a lot. Seek first his kingdom. The predecision that we want to talk about today is this: I will seek first the one who matters most. I will be devoted to Jesus. That statement is a determination. I've already decided what is the most important thing in my life. It means I've had to come to a couple of decisions. In fact, it's I've decided I want to get to heaven. There's only one way to get there. I've got to walk with Christ. And so I'm going to seek the one who matters the most, the one who lays the path before me, the one who made it possible. I'm going to be devoted to him. That's not to say that my marriage is not important. It's not to say that my job is not important. It's not to say that all these other things don't have roles to play within that. But it is to recognize the most important thing in life is my relationship with God and with Jesus Christ. And then if I have that part right, that's the rest of the statement of Matthew 6:33. If I get that part right, everything else begins to fall into place. So what does it mean to be devoted to Jesus? Acts chapter 2, verses 42 and 43. We arrive at life post Jesus on earth. He's came, he's lived among them, he's taught his disciples for 3.5 years. He's gone through the crucifixion, he's gone through the resurrection, and now he's given them direction. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. And oh, by the way, I've got to leave you for a while. I'm going back to be with the Father to prepare things, but I'm sending my Spirit to be among you. They were just scattered. They were just standing there at his arrest in the garden and abandoned him, fled in every direction. Peter had just been standing around the campfire at his trial and denied him 3 times. Judas had just hung himself from the guilt of turning him over to the authorities. And yet, here's Jesus saying, my Spirit's going to guide you. You're going to understand what is needed in the days to come. And so Acts chapter 2, verses 42 and 43, we find that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, which was teachings of Christ, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayer. And everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs being performed by the apostles. The word devoted there has this meaning of ongoing, continual. I point out that they had all those moments, even while he was still there with them, to point out how easy it could have been after they saw him ascend back to heaven to say, okay, well, this ride's over. I'm going back to the fishing boat. I'm going back to the tax collector's booth. I'm going back to, it would have been easy to disperse and to say, we learned a lot of things. We learned some things that'll help us, some things that'll carry on in life, but I guess it's just back to normal. They realized I've got to continue to walk with him, to remember the things that he's taught me, to make those the foremost principles in my life. And so they devoted themselves continually to doing that. They committed to their relationship, to study under Christ, to becoming more like Christ, despite him not being physically present. The impact that he had had on their lives was so strong, so fulfilling. They had to search out the ways to make it continue. And that developed this mindset of devotion to Christ. After 3.5 years of walking with him, of seeing the miracles that he performed, of hearing the teachings that he had done, of the impact he had had on their life, don't you know there was an emptiness that was there once he was gone? We experienced that with the loss of loved ones. Attended a funeral the end of this week. Everybody there had a hole in their heart, in their life, where this individual had played such a drastic role. The role of Christ is far more important. And they had this whole, and the way to fill it was to talk about the memories, to talk about what he had taught, to share those things, and to make that stay a part of their lives. And so that's what they were doing. But imagine if Acts chapter 2, verses 42 and 43 were written about Christians in today's culture. What would that verse sound like? Maybe a little bit like this. They devoted themselves to themselves. They continually and passionately pursued a self-centered life of comfort and ease. That from the fictional modern Christian version. And yet that describes accurately the lives most Christians are struggling to live today, isn't it? We say we want Christ. We say we know we need to follow him. And yet we're looking for these answers. We're looking for and all these things shall be added everywhere except in him. We want to jump past the seek first his kingdom, seek first his righteousness. We want those to be afterthoughts, things that we'll find and all this, and when we find it, then we'll have the kingdom and the righteousness. It's backwards. It's the opposite of what God was calling us to and how God tells us to find those things. Today, so many of us just want to be liked. We just want to be comfortable. We just want to be popular. We want to be TikTok famous. We want to finish school. We want to have a nice job, a job that we love. We want the nice house. We want the spouse that is that perfect spouse. We want to travel. And at the end of it, we hope to go to heaven. We accomplish some of those things to varying degrees based on the approach that we take to them. I challenge you this week Draw you a line on a piece of paper. And this is a little bit difficult in a sense, because I want you to break that line up into 168 pieces. That's one piece for each hour that you have this week. And then start shading in what those hours go to. You'll find that about a third of them probably go to sleep. Maybe a third to work or school. Some of that number is going to be a lot higher. For some, it may not be work. You may be retired. You may have to figure out what other activities replacing work and school there that you're doing with the hours of your day. But work through that. If you have a third at sleep and a third at work or school, that leaves you about 56 hours uh, in which we commute, we run chores, we go to the gym, we drive the kids places, we help the kids. Um, where in there is God? How much time out of that 168 hours each week do I have devoted to Him? We've got one checked off. We're here this morning. But how much time do I have set aside for prayer, for reading from His Word, allowing Him to speak to me and teach me and tell me and remind me, here's the way to do things properly? I think it's probably pretty obvious. If I invest 1 hour a week towards exercise, I can't expect that exercise to accomplish much, can I? If I spend 1 hour a week devoted to my spouse, how healthy is my marriage going to be? If I spend 1 hour a week with my children, how strong is my relationship with my children, my influence on them going to be? If I'm in school and my goal is to graduate the top of my class, but I only want to study for 1 hour a week, unless I'm just a born genius, I'm probably not going to be the top of my class. Probably be lucky if I graduate. We understand that with all of these other subjects. But when it comes to God, we don't seem to realize that if I'm only partially devoted to God, if I only spend a little bit of time with Him, when it's easy for me, when it's convenient for me, when there's nothing better to do, then we wonder why it's so easy to fall back to the same old sins. We wonder why we rarely share our faith with others. It's not surprising we care more what other people think about us than evidently what we think God thinks about us. John chapter 15 and verse 5. Jesus gives us this comparison that is so vital uh, that we have got to grasp and make a reality in our lives if we are going to get seeking first the kingdom of God, of seeking His righteousness. In this passage, Jesus says, I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. He's setting up this understanding. The place where all good is found is in him. The branch has no life if it's not connected to the vine. It has no supplement. It has no nutrients. It has no source of life. If that branch is broken off, it does not bear fruit because it dies. What leaf it has withers. What life it has begins to fade. And then there's somewhere in between those two realms that we find ourselves trying to live in. There's the fully attached branch that is healthy and bearing fruit and receiving all of the benefits of life that the vine has to offer. And then there's where we find ourselves where we're partially torn off. And we try to maintain just enough connection that we stay alive. You see it in nature sometimes. A storm, break a limb in a tree, but it's just a little bit that didn't break all the way off. And you'll see that it'll have a little bit of life to it, but it's not flourishing the way it used to. I'm afraid so many of us as Christians are. That's where we find ourselves. We've let our focus, we've let our lives, we've let Satan and the things that he tries to entice us with begin this process of breaking us off. And if we're not careful, we're only good to be pruned off. The Greek word that's translated there, remain, means to abide, to live in, to dwell in. And that's more than just an hourly, weekly devotion or duty to God. It is about being fully devoted, about being all in, devoted to the one who matters most. We'll read verse 4 there, John chapter 15 also. This is backing up one verse. In the course of this chapter, this word remain appears 11 times. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. 11 times Christ drives that picture home through the course of this chapter. It is stating the obvious to say the branch needs the vine. You don't stay connected, you're a dead limb. You lose that life source. We don't get nutrients, we don't bear fruit. We break easily. We dry up and crumble. Jesus is the vine. He is the source of life. He is the source of all that we are looking for. And he says, you are the branch. So be the branch. We're talking about a practical game plan that is all about seeking first, Pre-decide a time. I've got 168 hours this week. Lord willing that I live through the whole week. Where in that 168 hours am I not going to find time in the moment? Where in that 168 hours am I going to pre-decide and set aside as time? Because the reality is when we say, well, I'll find time somewhere in this week to do this. How many times do we end up finding time to do it? And if we do find a moment to do it, instead of it being, say, an hour set aside to really devote to studying a passage, to dwelling on that passage, thinking about it, praying about it, we get down and realize it's 15 minutes to Bible class, and I haven't looked over my Bible class list. 15 minutes, quick, flip through the verses, looking to see, trying to jot down an answer. How much did I get out of that 15 minutes? More than if I hadn't done them, but not as much as if I pre-decided and said, I'm going to set aside a specific amount of time for God. We do it for a lot of other things. We know what time we've got to have the kids to school. We know what time we've got to be at work. We plan all those things out. And yet we somehow just sort of leave God to get whatever's left over. Pre-decide a place. Don't just set aside the time and say, okay, well, wherever I'm at that time. And I say that because that gets awful easy to, well, I didn't know I was going to be at such and such a place when my time I set aside for God came. And it's not really convenient to get out my Bible and look at it and study right here. So, God, I'm just going to reschedule you. God just lost his hour. And it probably doesn't get rescheduled. So pre-decide a place. I'm going to get up early. I'm not a morning person. I'm one of those, I set an alarm for 5:30 and I hit it 15 times on the snooze to finally get up about 6:30. Some of you love mornings. Set aside some time. Get up and enjoy the morning with God and utilize that. But decide, here's my place, here's my time, and then have a plan. Maybe I'm going to spend so much time in prayer during that time, thinking about the prayer list from church, praying for those, my brothers and sisters that have these issues going on. Or I'm going to spend so much time looking over a Bible class lesson or going back over what the sermon was from Sunday or whatever it is. Have a plan. God, this is your time and your place and your moment to speak to me. That way, God doesn't get what's left over. And God is not a part of your life. God becomes your life. We will never be devoted to Jesus by accident. We have to predetermine, I'm going to be devoted, and then set out to do those things. We've got to predetermine, I'm going to seek first the one that matters most in time, in place, in plan, and realize that the moment I started, there are going to be resistance from Satan. There's going to be distractions. There's going to be reasons to quit, which is why I've already pre-decided I'm going to be ready for those things to come. I'm going to be committed to doing this. Even if I have a failure today, I'm going to pick back up and start again tomorrow. I am going to be devoted to Jesus. He is the vine. You're the branch. So be the branch. Take in the nutrient of Christ. Take in the life of Christ and bear the fruit of Christ. Determine that I will seek first the one who matters most because I am devoted to Jesus. If we can do that, we'll make it a long, long way towards seeing the true improvement in our lives that we've been looking for, to finding the fulfillment that we're looking for. You want to have a better marriage? Have a better relationship with God. You want to have a better work life? Have a better relationship with God. You want to have better kids? Have a better relationship with God. It is the one thing that makes everything else become better. The more committed we get at it, the more consistent we get at it, the more God can do and accomplish in our lives. The lesson's yours. If there's something we can do this morning to assist you in that walk with Christ, of making that commitment, as the song we sometimes sing says, all things are ready. God's ready. Christ has already been to the cross. The forgiveness is